And redirecting, and we should be take a few seconds to share where they can watch it here. Just to make sure that we're talking to somebody, you know.
I'm sorry?
I'm just making sure that it's on, just to make sure that, you know, we're not just talking to ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, but it looks like we are all good to go. Okay, now let me close some tabs. Okay, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for watching a live interview on the More Than English podcast. It is awesome to have you. It's awesome to have a guest again, right? And we are going to have a great conversation, especially directed toward if English listening is an issue of yours. I have Anthony Green here, and he is the founder of an app called Voicebook, correct?
That's right, voicebook.cloud, yeah.
Voicebook.cloud. We're going to get into that. And I know from some private conversations with Anthony that we share some similar disagreements with traditional language learning methods. And preparing specifically for exams and inside this closed box. It's our mission to really open that box and focus more on real communication. But Anthony, thanks for joining.
You're very welcome. Very welcome.
That's awesome. So just introduce yourself. I mean, this is really the first time we're actually connecting in person. I didn't want to get into this before and then have the same conversation again. So where are you from?
So I'm a Brit. I was born on the south coast of Britain. I was brought up in South London. And then I'd always loved traveling. And so the idea of teaching English was actually a passport to the world. Although I didn't actually get very far. And so I'm in Bari in the south of Italy, where I was aiming to come for 3 days, but that was about 35 years ago, something like that. But as you can see, it's beautiful and sunny in early February, and I'm sitting on my balcony doing this. So, you know, there's a lot of pluses with being here.
Yeah, it's fantastic. We share a similar tale, you know, because I'm right next door, relatively speaking, here in Spain. I'm originally from the United States. And now southern Spain, beautiful blue skies here too, right? And you're teaching in University of Bari, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I teach at the veterinary medicine department, which is very interesting, and it's kind of in a way what led me to do what I'm doing right now, because the students that I teach, they've done like a national exam to get in. You know, it's really tough, etc. And I thought, oh, wonderful! I'm going to be able to do some really nice advanced English with them. Not a chance. So a lot of them have kind of given up with English when they were, say, 11 or 12 years old, something like that. So they're at an A1, A2 level. And I was just very curious as to how such brilliant students could have failed so terribly in their language. And one of the things that I immediately cottoned onto is that they were convinced that English was a simple language, and that their inability to get beyond wherever they were was because they were no good at languages, whatever that means. Yeah.
Whatever that means. That's
When you're
right.
11 or 12, that is a very common expression that you hear, and you hear it from adults and older brothers and sisters, etc. And then I realized that when they get to their middle schools here in Italy, the most important figure is the teacher of Italian. So Italian literature and language, if you like, at middle school. And nearly every teacher that I've spoken to who does this job, so not teaching English, says to the kids, Italian is a really complex language, etc., etc. If you want a simple one, choose English. And all the kids go, oh no, I can't even ask a proper question in English. You know, I've been at my primary school and I've been trying to learn all this grammar and I can't do it. And as for, you know, making a negative sentence in English, that's just, it's just too much. And, you know, here in Italian, all I do is stick non in the word and I'm fine, yeah? And so there's this huge subpopulation, or population, maybe the main population of kids who are just spending their school years on English, thinking that they are no good, apart from all the problems of self-worth, etc., etc. It just isn't true, you know? And you know, it's such a shame. They've got all these future vets and they could be doing great work on the international stage, and they can't because they can't communicate. And
it's all right here. It's all, and I don't mean like intelligence, like it's all right here in what they tell themselves.
Yeah.
And just that
all you need is one thought that will hold you back, and you'll be held back for years and years and years
until you get it taken care of.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting in a way, because you in the end they all get there, and luckily my department backs me up very much on this, and so we just say, look, we've got to get them to a B2 level, because otherwise they're not going to be able to perform on the, you know, and they're not going to be good medics in their field, you know, because they're always going to be going, no, I can't really do that course, or I can't really read that sort of stuff there. I can't watch this video, etc., because I'm no good at languages. And so it's a huge pleasure for me, and especially for them, when they finally realize that they can actually handle this. Sorry, I've got my dog Argo here
awesome.
with me, who wants to be part of the
that's awesome.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a lot of fun when you get you know, kids who maybe do your exam 3 or 4 times, and then they say, thanks very much for not letting me pass straight away, because I wouldn't have discovered everything that I've discovered. And this voyage of discovery and exploration is just something that I very much encourage them to do, because at school, certainly here in Italy, they haven't had much exploration to do. It tends to be the teacher will explain grammar points or various other things, and then they're expected to memorize that and give it back to the teacher, and then they pass their tests and their exams, etc., which is obviously quite limiting. And so when I first did my very first EFL classes, I distinctly remember these older students than me, because I was like in my early 20s, and I would follow the book and do everything as I was told to do. Okay, I'll give you 2 listenings to this audio extract, and then you have to answer questions in it. Okay, yeah. And after 2 listenings, actually, no, after a few seconds, I would see their faces just kind of go. And I thought, what am I doing here? Okay, but I'll be really generous and I'll give them another listen. Yeah. And it was just the same, like after just a few seconds, they were unable to piece these sounds together because English is phonetically very complex, whatever the kids were told at school. And one of the questions that I ask at university is, say, you know, which language has more vowel sounds, English or Italian? And they all go, well, Italian, because it's more complex. And, you know, English has twice as many sounds as vowel sounds. And I'm sure that's the same with Spanish as well. I don't know how many vowel sounds there are with diphthongs, etc., but there are 10 in Italian, and there are 20 in, according to which version of English you speak. And
millions. We have millions of vowel sounds, right? Yeah, in Spanish, it's very phonetic, right? So an a is an a is an a, you know, yeah. That's just right. The way it is.
Right. And as far as I can make out, that lies very much at the heart of the problems that people have with listening. Because if you, I mean, there are very few monosyllabic words in Spanish or in Italian. But if you think of the number of words that begin with, say, b and finish with a d sound in English and have just one syllable. I mean, the other day I was just playing around and I came up with 17. And if you've only got 10 vowels in your repertory, or maybe even less if you're Spanish, then it's, you know, how can you distinguish between those? You have to do quite a lot of work on that. And you know, you have to be aware of the sounds that are in the language, and then you have to get a lot of practice with distinguishing these sounds, so that you know, for example, in Italy they'll say that the a sound in English is pronounced e, and so they can't hear the difference between bad and bed, which of course leads to a lot of good jokes, etc. But I mean, you know, with the 17, you know, the bode and the bod and the bird and the etc. And beard, etc. There are just so many sounds, and they're completely at sea, and so they just say, we give up. We don't want to do listening at school. And the teacher at school kind of goes, well, yeah, it's a bit of a pain, isn't it, doing listening in class? Because I've got one or two people who are really good and a whole host of people who are dreadful. And how come they always go and sit next to the best kids during the listening class? And how come they all get the answers right? You know, I can never catch them cheating, etc., etc. But it's all a bit of a waste of time, you know, if you're using comprehension questions to. It's great, you know, it's fine as a test, but how often do you need to test people on their listening? Twice a year, I don't know. But the rest of the time, it's not a learning activity. And yet the course books are absolutely full of these. It was like that 30 odd years ago when I started to teach. And very little has changed from that point of view. There's been very little bottom-up listening. And so if you've got comprehension questions and somebody already understands what they're hearing, then okay, that's fine as a test, as I was saying, but they're not doing any learning. And if they can't decipher what's going on, then it's a non-learning activity, just by definition. Then they've got that look on their face that I found looking at each other. What's he talking about? And
in many cases, it's just the opposite. It's a self-defeating activity.
Yes,
because they're looking for the wrong thing. They're going into it a lot of the times. You know, I hear it a lot. like, oh, listening is the worst. Listening is my least, my worst skill. And so they're approaching an exam with that mentality, telling themselves that. And then that's leading them to miss more because they might, start out missing a word. There's this fascination with capturing every word. I want to understand every word. And it's like, well, think about what you're saying. Like in your language, like your native language, you don't capture every word. Like the brain's just not built for that. And I usually use the analogy, like when you're watching TV and you get up to go to the kitchen and then you come back and you miss a little bit, you don't say, oh, I'm lost. I missed something, and your mind doesn't sit, oh, I missed something. I missed something. I missed something. You just catch up where you left off. And
that is true. But I think we have to be very, very careful about using L1 criteria for L2 because they're
I mean, in terms of their own expectations of themselves, people hold themselves. And I think that actually is very true. And that goes to my point that people hold themselves up to a higher expectation in English than even their L1. And which, by the way, anyone listening here, L1 means your first language, right? Little EFL terms, right? So, and like I always say that English is different than any other language in the world in terms of its expectations, its opportunities, and the pressure that people put on themselves. And so they expect to capture every word, which that's not the point of comprehension, right?
Jesse, I would actually differ from you on this because we are capable of understanding every word if we need to. Yeah. And when we don't get the word, we ask somebody to repeat the word and we go, yeah, okay, great. And
in English, our first language too, by the way. Like, oh, what was that you said?
Exactly. Yeah. And I've seen that even L2 learners, the second language learners of English, are perfectly capable of understanding every word if they are given the opportunity. And what the idea of what I do on our voicebook.cloud platform is to give them as many opportunities as they want to try out their various hypotheses. And so they're constantly going, what did they say? What did you say, etc. And they're getting it back, and they're training their ears to pick up on sounds that originally are very unfamiliar. And when you're listening to an authentic English text, then there are going to be words in there that you are not aware of. And our world gets around that, our world of English language teaching gets around that by scripting texts, making them a little bit too easy. And the delivery is generally very clear, etc., because they've got to understand it in their first two goes. And if they don't, then they get a bad mark. And what we found is that if we can get them to explore, and as I was saying, exploring is very much part of what I want to do. If we can get them exploring in a safe environment, then they can do wonders. And so if they're not learning through an activity because it's too difficult, let's have a look at what too difficult means, because just above our threshold of understanding, there's the zone of proximal development, which by definition, as Vygotsky said, is the area where most of the learning takes place. If it's way, way too difficult, no, but I think we're good enough as teachers to know not to give something that's way too difficult. If it's below your threshold, It's just, you just get it and you understand it. And so, as I was saying, no learning takes place. And so how can we get listening to take place in this zone of proximal development? Now, I don't think that the majority of textbooks are doing that. And so there's not a lot of learning going on through listening either. And certainly not improvement of listening while they're doing these classical listening activities. And which is why we came out with this idea of voicebook, where you're spending like 10% of your time in the below your threshold. Tell us what you can understand of this. Yeah, and I hope that half you'll understand and half you won't understand, because the rest of it will probably then be in your zone of proximal development. Okay, tell me what help you need to get all of these words that you're currently saying you can't understand. You know, do you want to slow it down? Do you want to click on the words and see what they mean, get some help, get some hints, etc., etc.? And in the end, you want to give up. And by kind of repeatedly working on what their needs are, their specific needs, they're saying, we can get all of this, we want to work on this. Nobody else at the moment in the EFL world is really helping us to work in this area here. And so what we've seen is that people have gone from understanding like 2 or 3 words a minute when they start out, to basically nothing, to understanding 25 to 35, which is basically everything. And they're doing that and understanding every single word, because, I mean, for Italians, the most common word in English, the, contains 2 sounds which they don't have in their language, and so they don't hear it. And the rhythm of English is so completely different from Italian. I joke with Italians and I say, everyone, what's the music that everybody associates Italy with? And some of them will say the Neapolitan style music, but of course it's opera, opera lyrica, as they call it here. And I say, how is opera lyrica pronounced? Why is that? Why does that work in Italian? Because you pronounce every syllable like really clearly. Da, 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 da. Oh, I won't do too much of that. I said, what music do you associate with English? It's rock music, isn't it? And in rock music, you have like a strong sound, and then and we speak English like that. And so we will say words like f and t, and for an Italian, like that sound is not part of opera. It's not even really a syllable as far as they can make out, yeah? And so their brains have been trained in the first years of their life before they've come across English to ignore, even. You know?
Because of their natural, because of their language, the sounds in their own language and what they're used to understanding and listening, right?
Yeah, so is the sound of the wind, maybe, but it's not language. And so their brains kind of know that they can ignore it and just concentrate on what they specifically hear. And so they just need help with training to discover these sounds. Now you can teach it kind of top down as well, but certainly by the time they're at middle school and definitely at high school and most definitely at university, everybody's learned different things, and you know, it's that's not the kind of thing that I find particularly works with sort of top down, but it does work when it's an experience that they have of, oh no, how come I couldn't understand these little words here? which kind of make the skeleton of the of English syntax of the sentence. And so those are the things that you really need in order to understand whether they're going to do something, or they did something, or then they're not going to do it, or that they're not doing it now, or whatever. All of these little words, which are all down here in terms of rhythm. They're very, very weak syllables. And if your language doesn't have weak syllables, and I think it's probably true for Spanish as well, then you're not automatically going to hear that. And so if you can explore and get that, then you've understood it for good. If it's the teacher who tells you, okay, you know that that exists, it's not the knowledge that counts, though, it's the experience. And once you've discovered that, through exploration, you can actually pick up on a lot of interesting things that for 10 years of your English have been impossible to pick up on. Then you actually turn around, you say, actually, I am capable of language. I do have this potential to pick up on language, and let's see what happens. And so luckily they all managed to get to this B2 level, and it's very nice when kids who had a problem with you then write to you a few years later on LinkedIn and say, hey, I'm a veterinary inspector in Wales now, you know, and I go,
that's amazing. Yeah. So, yeah, it sounds, I mean, it all comes down to really believing that they can. Like, that's the foundation, right? And like you said it in the beginning, that so many people go into a listening exercise, or, oh, I can't understand a movie, or whatever, and they kind of give up on themselves before. So it sounds like the biggest thing that you do is implant that self-belief in them first.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you're getting the results that, you know, you definitely are. So I guess with voicebook.cloud, from what's the general time frame where someone will go from not understanding anything to having these tremendous results? In what kind of time frame is that?
Yeah, it tends to be, the sessions tend to last about an hour or so, something like that, or up to an hour, should we say. And what we've seen is these people who went from like 2 to 3 words a minute up to 35, it would be 20 hours or so, something like that on the platform. So there's quite a lot of work that goes into it. But, you know, we are transforming something that's quite we're transforming negative self-worth into positive self-worth as we're doing that thing. And they can input using the spoken word, so using Siri or Google Voice on their phones, etc., or else by writing in, etc. And so you know, even people who have dyslexia or learning difficulties or stuff like that can also use it to connect word and sound. And one teacher was from a primary school, and she said, you know what I love about this is that we have some kids who complete things in 5 minutes. Obviously the elementary school, primary school stuff is very simple. We have kids who finish this in 5 minutes, and others who take 40 minutes over it. But the nice thing is that at the end of those 2 sessions, they've done it in 5 minutes or they've done it in 40 minutes. They get to the same place. And the kids who take 40 minutes, they say, do you know what? We really like this because we can just keep going. We can try as many times as we want. And there's no punishment going on, you know. Whereas very often what tends to happen with tech is you get 2 bites of the cherry, and if you don't get that on those 2 bites, then you've got a black mark, and you are bad at English. You are.
It's your identity.
Yeah, And when you're 8 years old, you decided that that English is not for you. Yeah. And you know, English is a long journey, and it's terrible, you know, that you would start out, find the first hurdle, find the first obstacle, not be able to get over it, and then just give up, you know, because I don't know what your Spanish is like, you know, but when I speak Italian 30 odd years later, people go, oh yeah, so what part of England are you from? I go, oh,
yeah.
You know, language learning is a tough a tough business, whatever language you're learning.
Yeah. I take a similar process. My focus for my students is mostly with speaking, but it's the same journey. It's the same frustrations. You know, we start out as kids in academy and, you know, have, hopefully with good teacher, games, and English is fun and it's useful, like questions like, what's your favorite animal? What's your favorite color? Where are you from? All of these natural kinds of things that kids answer anyway, right? And then reaches a point when exams come in, right? And English is no longer about useful communication. It's about answering answering questions the right way, learning this format, and that's your identity. That turns into your identity. So it sounds like we have a very similar journey, but with different skills. And that's beautiful because, like you said in the beginning, English language in general, as ESL space, really hasn't developed much over the past, 30 years, right? It's still like listen and repeat. It's still answering these same questions. Yeah, exams like modify, and they try to get, have more useful kind of practical ways of testing, but it's still the same kind of structure. I give you a grammar structure, I give you something, and then you memorize it and tell me what I told you. That's generally what it is.
And if we can turn it round and get students to explore English, and from that say what their grammar needs are, come along to the class. I tell mine, the best classes are where we don't do what I've prepared for you for that day. It's when you come in and you say, look, I had this problem, I had that problem, I had that problem, etc. with that. And we just explore together. And that will generally bring up some sort of grammar point, but it's a grammar point that is based on their needs, not on what the teacher thinks they ought to be doing. Yeah. And there've been a couple of people who very much helped me with this just through almost chance meetings, and two people who've really gone into listening in far more depth than I have. And one of them is a guy called Richard Caldwell, and another is John Field. And I never actually ended up doing anything with either of them, but they've published books on listening that if somebody's drawn into what we've been talking about today and wants to look into that further, just type in their names into Google, and you'll find plenty of stuff about John Field and Richard Caldwell. Caldwell is C-A-U-L-D. Well, and they've been trying. I think they don't feel that they've had the success that they wanted to have, trying to balance out top-down, teacher-centered, shall we say, listening, but it could be applied to all sorts of areas of English language teaching, and just getting it to be based on the students' needs and how best can we do that. And so really my attempt with the voicebook.cloud platform has been just to stand on their shoulders, because they've provided all of the rationale for it. that I could never get across in half an hour talking to you. Yeah, go and have a look at so listening in the language classroom is John Field's major one. And with Richard Coolwell has written a huge number of books, but and any number of those may be useful. So
that's great.
Whatever's the best bargain on Amazon or whatever.
Yeah, look those up. And one other thing I wanted to touch on is, it comes from, I think, even higher than like the top-down teacher approach, but it's the education system, it's the expectations of ESL that certificates are the end-all be-all of fluency, right? And it's the education system, because I know a lot of very good teachers, but they feel like their hands are tied in the classroom because they have to go through this book, and they have to go through this curriculum, and they have to give these exams. So really, what do you, I guess, suggest for either learners or teachers in those kinds of situations?
I knew you were going to ask me a horrible question like that. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? You know, because there needs to be a standard. And I don't know very many other ways, apart from exams, of measuring a standard. But we've got to get a balance into that, because some of the students are never going to get to that exam level. And I think I come back to this exploration, because the students who decide they're going to go online and talk to people in chat rooms, etc., obviously doing it safely, etc., they don't need us teachers very much. We teachers need to get them up to that kind of level. Once they get to that, once they're able to do that, they can just spread their wings and they can go. And they, in a way, they don't need us in order to be able to do that. And we can then change our role into be one of coaching them, pushing them, suggesting things that they could be doing to add to their idiomatic knowledge, etc. All sorts of things. And in a way, that's coming back to what you were saying at the beginning, putting the fun back into it, because there's a whole world out there, and kids love being on the net and exchanging information with people. And when they feel happy about doing that in English, they feel like they're citizens of the world. And so if we can push our students into not being afraid of making mistakes. And what I say to my kids is that, well, my kids, I say, they're university students, and they come along and they'll make a mistake, and I'll gently correct them. And the first word that they say is sorry. Because every time they've made a mistake in the past, they've had a big black mark against them. Oh, great, the teacher goes, okay, that's -1 for that person. Yeah, add up 10 mistakes, you got 0. Okay, great.
At least that's their perception. That's their perception so much that the teachers are rooting against them, which usually is not the case. But it's their perception, and perception is reality.
Exactly. Yeah. And so I say, you're not allowed to say sorry in this classroom. And another thing, you're not allowed to ask if what you said was a stupid question. I said, okay, I'll allow you to say it's a stupid question if you've asked it 5 times in the same lesson. But and when you make a mistake, your word that you have to say instead of sorry is thank you. But you say it to the mistake, because the mistake is what's helping you to learn the language. And so just try and make as many mistakes, push your borders, because that's going to push you into the zone of proximal development. You can't be in your zone of proximal development and not make mistakes. You don't make mistakes when you're down here, when you're lacking in ambition, etc., below your threshold. You don't need that. Okay, it's quite useful to do a little bit of practice, etc. But this is where you need to be. So try and be here as much as you possibly can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Push yourself and make more mistakes, learn from your mistakes. Your mistakes are not your identity. And
Yes.
And thank you for your time. We've been talking for an hour. Thank you. Are there any parting words, anything you want to, so you can be found on LinkedIn, but also at voicebook.cloud or voicebook.cloud.com. What's the exact address?
It is just voicebook.cloud.
Okay.
But what I would suggest is that we give your listeners a link that they can go into. There's a class called Find Your Level, where you can try out various things from pre-A1 to C2. It'd be great to see if somebody can handle that, and find out what your zone of proximal development is. And of course, from a lot of students, that's going to be sort of an A2, B1 or so, something like that. But whatever works for you, and just make sure that you're making mistakes with it, but then managing in the end to sort it out. So what very often happens is that at the beginning they're listening to it and they've got that look on their face, and I'm never going to get this, I'm never going to do that. And then they do complete it. Maybe it takes, the extract might be 10 seconds and they might take 5 minutes over it, but they do complete it. And then at the end, I say, click on play again and just sit back and listen. And 9 times out of 10, they go, why did I have problems with understanding that at the beginning?
Awesome. Yeah.
So they're growing just very slightly each time. They grow, they're pushing their boundaries, and that zone of proximal development, which started here, after a while is starting to be here and here and here, and that's how they go from 2 to 3 words a minute to 25 to 35.
Amazing.
So click on the link, guys. Give it a go.
I'll put that in the description right after here. I'll put that link in the description.
Lovely.
It was awesome connecting, Anthony. Thank you for your time. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, thanks. It's been great. And I'm now going to have to take my dog for a walk. And as soon as I clap, he's probably going to go, going to get very interested. Here he is down. I don't know if you can see him down there sitting.
I see him lurking there in the shadows.
And here, as soon as I go here he comes along.
There he comes. Cool. That's condition. That's much like English learning. That's conditioning, right?
That is absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you, Anthony.
Jesse, it's been a pleasure.